Welcome to Woman Over 50. I'm your host, Linda Barnby, and today I have with me Karen Jones. Hi, Karen.
Hey, Linda. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. Karen is a relationship and dating coach, and she's been helping women have scrumptious relationships with men since 1997. And she's the author of the book, Men Are Great. So welcome, Karen. I'm so glad to have you here and your expertise.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I also want to mention that Karen is a regular columnist on Woman Over 50. And so you can find her advice columns once a month on womanover50.com. So Karen, let me get started, jump right in and ask you, what about women looking for men and starting to date over age 50? Tell me about your thoughts about that.
Well, a very large segment of all of my clients, the women who are attracted to me, are over 50. That is really my demographic, 50s, even 60s and beyond. And one of the things that I find, well, first of all, tons and tons of success stories, absolutely everywhere. It's one of the biggest pieces of work that I often am doing with women right off the bat when we start working together is to get women shifted into that mode of course it's possible, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm ready to party. There really are lots and lots of success stories if you are open to hearing them. I like to come out of the closet right away. I'm a huge fan of online dating, really big fan of online dating. Mm-hmm. There are certainly some things, some rules of thumb, some ways to go about it that have it be successful. And there's certainly lots of ways that people do it that have it be, close to a disaster, right? And that's my job, is to make sure that it really works as opposed to having it be in the disaster column. Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure you have lots and lots of success stories, and I'm going to ask you to share one or two a little bit later on, if you will. But I want to ask you first, what are some obstacles that you see women facing when they're trying to find good men?
That's a big question. And I'm going to talk both for the online dating kind of stuff and then just the sort of in general obstacles that I see women really are packing around with them, while in their hearts they are still longing for that kind of juicy, scrumptious relationship with a good man. But there are the things that are kind of in their luggage, let's say, that are really interfering. So
are you referring to baggage?
Yes.
We all have it.
Yeah, and not just the baggage, the stuff that we've had since we were little kids, etc., which everybody has some of that, but also just what we start to collect over time, the stories that we collect over time, the evidence that we gather over time, that certain things are absolutely true, like men only want young women, or women over 50, forget it. What was that stupid thing? I hated this so much. Years ago, there was might have been in, I don't know, Time magazine or something. And it was on the front page, and it was something like women over 40 have a bigger chance of something crazy, like get struck by lightning, than to end up in a relationship. And I hated that story. And I'll bet you saw, right, because we've been around for a while, you saw how often that was being passed around woman to woman over the age of 40, saying, see, we're totally
doomed. Yes. Yeah. And I remember talking with friends about that, and the absolute feeling of doom and despair, from some of these women who are my friends who, were looking for men and just felt like their chances were so slim. It was, why try?
Exactly. I mean, if I've got a bigger chance of getting hit by lightning, just give up. Just hang it up, right? Just let go.
Well, or move to Florida, because Florida is the #1 lightning capital in the world. Your chances of finding good men go way up then.
I'm going to keep that in my toolkit. Thanks for that, Linda.
Well, let's talk about
for everything.
So let's talk a little bit about how women find men, and starting out with online dating, because that's a big interest for women. Where are these men? Where do I find them?
Oh, it's huge. Well, listen, I'll tell you one thing. I'm constantly saying this to women. Here's the deal. there are good men everywhere. Everywhere. One of my favorite stories, I was working with this woman years ago, and she was committed to getting married. So we started working together once a week, and she had a track record that was pretty disastrous. She had a magnet for a certain kind of man that was just train wreck material. And so I was just constantly telling her, look, there are good men everywhere, everywhere. And she had gotten a new car, and she pulls into the gas station. She's fiddling with her purse, and this man, she hears a man saying, wow, nice car. She assumes it's the gas station attendant. She totally just eliminates any kind of, what, she's not going to pay any attention, right? She's just still in her purse. Yeah, thanks. And then she looks in her rearview mirror, and this very handsome, well-dressed man is walking back to his Mercedes, having just complimented her on her really nice car. And she just thought, okay, Karen, I think you're right. I'll pay more attention to what you tell me. But really, there are good men everywhere. Now, one of the things, and this sort of touches back on some of the obstacle conversation, one of the things that is very important for women to be aware of this is this, you can get so locked into, there's only one kind of man who's the right kind of man for me. Now, right. By the way, generally speaking, since you think about the divorce rate and then beyond divorce rate, how many relationships are actually doomed to fail? Right. A huge part of that is because we tend to have a type that we're attracted to, and usually, generally, that type is kind of a disaster for us. So not only are there good men everywhere, but be willing to expand your horizons. Be willing to think outside of what your narrow definition of good man may have been up till now. And by the way, never compromise on those things that are absolutely core, essential qualities that you never, ever, ever should compromise on, ever. You're better off single for the rest of your life than trying to have a relationship with a man who does not meet those absolute requirements. So,
like having a good character and being honest and things of that nature. Where
absolutely, yeah. Right. There are things that are so core, and usually they're very tied to our own values, and they're core to who we are, and they are essential to have some kind of a connection in a man who's going to be a good fit for us. Right. I mean, that old saying about opposites attract, not generally a good idea for the most part. You might be attracted to it initially, but I heard somebody say once, and I found this to be pretty true, that the things that you're initially attracted to in someone are often the reasons that you leave them later on.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomenon. I would love to learn more about that phenomenon because I have heard that. Yep. And I think it's true.
Yeah. And that there's a lot of reasons for it, which it's not really the context of our talk today. So we can actually have this conversation another time. Like, what is it that has relationships fail and these relationships might have had or seem to have a really good, promising start. So that's a juicy conversation to have.
Karen, I have a whole list of juicy conversations that we're going to need to have.
So. I'm game. It's my favorite topic. Try to stop me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about women being preyed upon by men, because we know it happens. In fact, yes. You know that I wrote one of my most recent articles on womanover50.com was about scammers. And yes. And you gave a wonderful reply. We chatted about that in the comments, and I'd love to welcome others to join in that right. discussion too on Woman Over 50. Right. But talk to me a little bit about the incidence of scamming, and how often does it happen statistically, and maybe what women need to look for to protect themselves from that.
Great. So it's a very important thing to address, because for a woman to feel safe dating, whether online or offline, you've got to take that very seriously. What does it take for you to feel completely safe? Because if you don't feel safe, guess how you show up? Guarded, defended, distrustful. And a man who is worthy of your trust and worthy of your love, he's not going to be attracted to a woman who's basically saying, I don't trust you, and you're probably a creep until you prove otherwise. So right. It's very important to take care of that sense of safety. And yes, are there scammers out there? Unfortunately, yes. And it's on the rise. I don't know exactly the percentage. It's actually still overall, it's a tiny percentage of all of the experiences that are going on, specifically in online dating. I mean, there's something, the last statistic that I read was that in any given moment, there's something like 10 million people online, specifically on an online site somewhere in the world, in any given moment, 10 million people.
That's a phenomenal number.
I know. Tiny percentage of that, scammers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a business. I mean, there are teams of people who come together and they put forward a persona and they take turns kind of writing the responses back and forth and that type of thing. So does it go on? Yes. You know, really, there's a lot of stuff that goes on online that also goes on offline. Think of it like it's a microcosm of what happens in the world. Are there liars online? Yes, just like there are liars offline. And so the things that for a woman to really take care of herself, there are just some really good rules of thumb. First one, absolutely, because I've never seen an exception to this. There may be, but I've never heard of one. We tend to sense the problem as soon as it shows up, right? If somebody's a liar, we tend to pick that up very quickly. If there's a scam thing going on, we tend to have a moment where we think something feels fishy about this, or this sounds too good to be true, or, but we plow over that because our fantasy takes over. And this is a big thing for us as women. I can make it better. I can figure this out. Right? Maybe
I can fix him.
I'll fix him, or I'll fix it, or I'll figure it out. Or, you know, we just sort of take on a lot of, because I'm really interested in this particular thing happening, I'm going to figure it out. And we just lock into what is that going to take? So first rule of thumb, never override your gut.
Good advice, Karen.
Right? The more you override it, the quieter it's going to get, which means you're going to end up farther along some kind of a potential disaster path before you finally realize, ooh, my gut was right. So the more you listen to it and the more you honor it, the more clearly it's going to speak to you and the more quickly it's going to speak to you. So honor your gut. All right. Second thing, and we just touched on it. If something seems or sounds or feels like, wow, this seems too good to be true, run away. Right? Some man who shows up, and this can so appeal to our ego, you know, especially if you've been on a long, dry stretch and you're just starved for this kind of attention. But if a man shows up and all of a sudden he can't get enough of you, and it happens really suddenly, repeat after me. It has nothing to do with me. He doesn't know me. There's something going on, but it has nothing to do with who I really am. So just know that. If it starts off gangbusters, this is not about you. He's got some need. Now, it could be that he's just an emotionally needy man. It could be that he's actually priming the pumps for a scam. So if it seems too good to be true, please run away.
That's right. We're not Cinderella, and Prince Charming doesn't necessarily exist.
Right. Now you may, just a little bit of a tie back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is, you know, to have that type, and we all have that type that we're attracted to. And I'm always encouraging women to just spread out, you know, stretch out, look for more things that actually could be a fit. And I've got lots of stories about women who are now happily married because they did that. They expanded their definition of what was going to be a good fit for them. Right? So, you know, definitely expand on that. Let yourself be open to something that's outside of your normal box, but don't go outside of your radar, going off and saying there's a problem here. There was something else I was going to say and I forgot. I lost my train of thought.
Well, let's move into a success story. I think we're all waiting to hear some success stories. I know you have a bunch.
I do. Now, you know, I want to tell you about a couple of stories of women, just because we've just been talking about this, a couple of stories of women who did go outside of their narrowly defined, this is the right kind of man for me. One woman, and, you know, like I said, most of my clients are 50 and beyond, some late 40s-ish, mid 40s. So anyway, so this one gal, we went through this process of having her really identify what those core things were that she required, which is very important for all of us to know. And she ended up attracting a man through online dating who was a bit shorter than she was. I think 4 inches. I mean, it's a pretty substantial difference in height. And so she just kept going back to her list of the things that she required. And, you know, he checked all the boxes. He was all of those things. And she just kept saying, oh, but he's he's too short. And so we talked about what is that about for her? You know, there's a lot of what drives us at the level of instinct. Like, our man should be taller, he should be stronger, he should be more powerful, and he should make more money. That's our instinct. That's our cave woman saying, if all those things are true, then I am going to be protected and provided for. Now, in this day and age, come on, gals, we can run circles around most men. We don't want them to feel that from us, but that's the truth. We don't need them. You don't need them. So when you can really keep bringing more of just more consciousness, more awareness to what you're using as your criteria for choosing a man, you're going to expand your horizons right off the bat. And so just happy story. She kept working with this. What's that about for me? And then she kept focusing on all his great qualities and how much of a fit he was for what she deeply, truly wanted. They just got married in May. Happy.
Oh, wonderful.
Another gal, same thing. She had, for the majority of her dating life, she had been dating men who ended up breaking her heart. They were just, they were not available, really. Even she had married one and still not available. And so we did the work. She ended up expanding her horizons, and she keeps sending me, she sent me a picture of their wedding. She sends me just notes once in a while. I tell everybody about you because I'm so happily married. And it was a man who she had to keep doing that work of, he fits what I need and require. I don't have that initial, gotta have him thing, although it developed because you need to have attraction. So those are a couple stories about just staying the course with what you know is important to you. And then for those of you gals watching who have the story, and we've already talked about media is kind of fanning the flame of, boy, if you're over 50, you may as well just give it up. So P.S. stop paying attention to those stories, because what you feed your brain just keeps being more and more truth, and it impacts how you feel, and it impacts how you relate with the world. So my very strong recommendation always is shut your ears off to stories of this, because women, we'll talk about disaster stories more often than we'll talk about good stories. It's an instinct thing. It's okay. But so you just, it's like you put blinders on only for your ears, really. And you just look for the stories and pay attention to stories of successes. They're everywhere, I promise you.
And if your decision is that you're going to meet a wonderful man, then it's going to be more likely that you will, because you have that positive outlook.
It has happened more times than I can count. Sorry about the phone.
That's all right.
It's happened more times than I can count that if a woman comes to me and she says, you know what, I'm all excited about online dating. I know that that's going to work beautifully. Hang on a second. Sorry. That's enough of that. So anyway, I've had women time and time again who've come to me and they've said, I'm so excited. This is going to be a great adventure. Yeah. I'm going to meet really interesting men. And without fail, they're right. Mm. And I've had women come to me who have said, that's going to be a disaster, only creeps. Oh, and they're right. Mm-hmm. It is so, I'll tell you, the more you pay attention to that, the more it seems eerie. It seems kind of otherworldly, but you pay attention to this, you'll see how often it is true. Just amazing. We tend to get what we expect is one of my favorite quotes.
Yes.
Norman Vincent Peale. It's absolutely
yes.
true.
And it's so true. And I found that true with my own children. If I expected great things from them, they came through. So yeah, right. Same thing with dating.
That's right.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for your wisdom and expertise this morning. And we're going to have future talks about all these juicy topics that we weren't able to touch on today. And below the video, everyone will be able to see how to connect with you on theheartmatters.com and your book, Men Are Great. So, Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
You are so welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I'll see you again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.